Hello, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Danish Kazdar. I am a fellow member of ACCA and I am also a company certified company secretary. So today we are going to discuss the responsibilities, powers and functions of the board of directors in light of the public sector corporate governance rules 2013 issued by the SECP. So the first point is that the directors of a board shall be persons who in opinion of the government shall assist the public sector company to achieve its principal objective of the board and shall accordingly exercise powers and carry out its fiduciary duties with a sense of objective judgment and in the best interest of the company. So the duty of the board is to see the can consider the best interest of the company whenever whatever decision they are making. The second duty of board is to evaluate the candidate based on fit and proper criteria and the guidelines specified by the commission. So there are detailed procedures which are mentioned in the Companies Act and also in the articles of association of the company that there is a fit and proper criteria to appoint the board members, and especially with respect to the position of chief executive, there has to be a recommendation of at least three candidates. But there is an exception that where the CEO is nominated by the government, then that person would be appointed as the CEO. One important aspect is that the board also has to ensure succession planning of the chief executive. So this is an important point to remember. The third point is that the board shall ensure obligation of the share to all shareholders are fulfilled and they are duly informed in a timely manner of all material events through shareholder meetings. So it is the board's responsibility to inform the shareholders of all significant events, and one way is to disseminate important information through various platforms. It's the company's website, its social media pages, for example LinkedIn. Almost today almost all companies are actually do have accounts on LinkedIn, and they post significant material information uh, through social media. So that is also a way to disseminate information, and of course there are formal channels also. The fourth point is that the board shall ensure professional standards and corporate values are in place that promotes integrity for the board, and a code of conduct is a document which needs to be made, and the purpose of that document, it is the duty of board to have to draft this document, and the purpose is to articulate acceptable and unacceptable behaviors. So this is an important aspect which the board would have an HR committee, and that would uh, be most probably be assigned to that committee to develop uh, this code of conduct. And as we can see that there is a redressal of grievance settlement process also, which is usually part of the HR policy. So this needs to be done by the board. The board shall establish a system of sound internal control. So here we are talking about an internal audit function, and the purpose of that function would be to ensure compliance with the fundamental principles of probity, propriety, objectivity, integrity, and honesty. So these are explained in the next points. The principle of probity and propriety entails that the company assets and resources are not used for private advantage. So one of the key functions of internal audit is to determine whether that expenditure, whatever decision was taken, that was taken in primarily for the best interest of the company and not for any uh, private advantage or misuse of assets was not done. So this is a very key point to consider. And then of course the handling of public funds, assets, resources and confidential information, and claiming of expenditure. So all of this has to be done to promote the object of the company, and there should be a defined rationale for which assets are procured, for which any expenditure is incurred, and that rationale needs to be documented so that any person can validate that in an objective manner. The principle of objectivity, integrity, and honesty requires. So here it is elaborating that the company would not allow a conflict of interest in any of his transaction, and if there is a conflict, then that director would need to excuse him or herself from that discussion, and there should be a clear conflict of interest policy also, which I believe is mentioned here. or in the next paras, that the company needs to have a conflict of interest policy. Now here it is further explaining what is a conflict of interest. So this is also one of the key matters and the key functions of board, and now of internal audit. You can say that their duty is to also to identify the conflict of interest and in the company's transactions, and how it would be done. One important document is the register of interest, which would record all relevant personal, financial, and business interests. So this is really important document, because this would serve as a compliance for IAS 24, International Standards of Auditing 550, ISA 550, and also Section 205 of Companies Act 2017, where it is required, it is mandatory for the companies to have a robust mechanism for the identification of related parties. So such a document, register of interest, would really help in compliance to those sections which I've just mentioned. So this would be a key function of the internal audit. Then the board's duty is to adopt a vision or mission statement. Every company has a vision and mission statement. So board, the seventh duty of the board is to formulate significant policies. So these are the main policy which the board needs to have. There should be a policy on the formal approval and adoption of annual report. There should be effective communication policy. There should be a risk management policy, procurement policy, marketing policy. There could be write-off bad debts policy, fixed assets policy, and there are various policies. Of course, the context of the company would further determine which policy is required as mandatory. Of course, policies like human resource and capital expenditure and accounting policies are mandatory, and that would be available, that would be followed in every company. But here we are learning that this is the duty of the board to have all these policies. And not just to have these policies is sufficient, but a complete record of particulars of the above mentioned policies along with the dates on which they were approved or amended by the board shall be maintained. So this is also really important, that a policy should have clear date of issuance and the last review date and such detail, which are helpful in enhancing the quality of the document. The board shall define a level of materiality. This is a very important concept, because materiality is usually it is not defined as some exact percentages, but materiality is an important concept, and reputed firms, audit firms, for example big four audit firms, usually consider 1% of amount of sales or 5% of amount of profit as a material amount. And so if any amount touches that materiality level, then the board needs to consider that as an important point to discuss in the board meeting, just on the basis of the amount. Of course, the transaction can be material based on other things, for example conflict of interest, and it could be other factors also, but here we are just talking about the amount. So this is important, that the board if defines the level of materiality, so that the recommendation of any committee of the board may be set up for that purpose. The board shall ensure compliance with reporting requirements. So there would be various requirements received from the government from time to time, and this has to be complied by the board. And finally, the board has to nominate a company secretary. So it is mandatory for a public company to have a company secretary, and the job of company secretary is usually mentioned in the articles of the company. And the board the main purpose of company secretary is to report to the board's chairman, and he or she has to attend all the board meetings, record minutes, and advise board on compliance and governance matters, uh, and advise board on the best practices, and give his recommendation on the best in the best possible manner. So here we conclude our discussion. I hope you enjoyed and learned through this lecture, and do not forget to like the channel. Thank you.